Okay, welcome everybody to the Kindship, Your Questions, Your NDIS interview. My name is Sandy Golder. I'm one of the co-founders here at Kindship. So Kindship is Australia's first social networking app for parents and carers of neurodiverse individuals and people with disabilities. So we provide an online and in-person support for parents and carers and really helping them feel part of a community and to feel supported and valued. So today, before we kick off our interview, we just wanted to explain that we are not aligned with any particular political party, but we really want our community to feel empowered and really have all the information they need about this really important topic of the NDIS, because we know it affects all of our families so much. So we've invited our Labor candidates, Liberal and the Green Party representatives to share the NDIS policies. We're still awaiting responses from Liberal and Greens, but we wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we really want everyone to have a clear understanding of all the policies. So today I'm joined by our Head of Advocacy, Linda Fennick. Thanks for joining us, Linda, and Ms. Susan Templeman and Mr. Bill Shorten. So Susan is the Federal Member of Parliament for Macquarie, and has been extremely supportive in helping Linda and I advocate for many members of our community with the NDIS. So we super appreciate her being here today. And Bill Shorten is the current Shadow Minister for the NDIS, and he's held this position since 2019. So we're so grateful for all of you joining us today to discuss this really important topic, because it is a really essential part of many of our decisions with this election coming up. So Bill, we hear you've had an eventful week. So for those who don't know, Bill's been diagnosed with COVID and he should be resting, but how are you feeling today? Do you want to fill everybody in?
I'm feeling okay. Like it's there's a lot of other people who get COVID are getting it a lot worse than me. I'm very sure of that. But I am isolating and I want to get back onto the campaign trail. But because I love all things to do with disability and NDIS, I didn't want to miss the chance to have a discussion and not just answer questions, but hear observations, because I think that politics should be a two-way communication exercise, not just one way.
Awesome. Yeah, we really appreciate you being here, even though you're under the weather. So we do know that the NDIS has often been described as like Labor's baby. So why is the NDIS your portfolio, and like what does it mean to you?
Listen, let me go to the heart of the matter straight away. Listen, there's lots of reasons to change the government, in my opinion, but there's none more important than NDIS. I am genuinely scared about what happens if we get another 3 years of the same government. You could summarise our in 2 words, our policy on NDIS. It's restore trust. That's where I'm coming from. The NDIS needs a government and a minister who want to see the best for it. I'm not going to scare people with a sustainability crisis rhetoric. That doesn't mean I don't think that we couldn't save money. You know, I think there's overcharging. I think there's underservicing. I think the NDIS has become a nightmare of bureaucracy. It's like a second full-time job. When we set up the NDIS, I wanted to replace ageing parents up at midnight worrying who's going to look after their adult child when they no longer can. But now all this government's done is replace it with the anxiety that if you got a good package, it's going to get cut. So I think that there's a lot we can do to make the scheme run better. It all starts with the initial plan and it goes from there. But I just want to say to people, and gee whiz, it's so important now when I think about what this election's about. I really worry about what will happen to the scheme, most importantly, the participants and the people who love them, if we get another 3 years of this cutting and, poor and competent management. Sorry to be so direct, but that's my view.
No. Well, we've got lots and lots of questions that have been submitted today, and we've tried to summarise them into main topics. Right. So we'll get onto those specific topics. One of the questions was around, I know this has been quite eventful in the last week, around the 6-point plan. We had some concerns from our community that they feel that it was a bit ambiguous. So can you explain exactly what that 6-point plan means for people with disabilities?
The 6-point plan is part of our broader campaign, our broader policy. And Anthony was right when he gave the answer. It's about putting people with disability back at the centre of the scheme. No one should be anxious about what we're proposing. We're the only ones who've proposed a detailed policy. It's up on the website. It goes for several pages. But it's about restoring trust. So some of our principles that we would do with running, the NDIS is funded, but what we would do is we would reduce the waste. We would stop resorting to lawyers to decide claims. We would put more staff back into the scheme so that you can deal with humans, not just digital website portals and whatnot. We also want to bring forward the 2023 review of the scheme to 2022, not with the aim of cutting it, but with the aim of just summarising all the good ideas which have been put forward and making the scheme operate better. We want to get the plan right. What I've heard over the last 3 years, and I've done hundreds of meetings with thousands of people from all parts of the disability world, participants, families, workers, advocates, you name it, I've met with them. What we want to do is to make sure that the first plan works well. We get people telling me all the time that they have a good meeting and then they get a plan which is as if it was written for someone else. We also want to then make sure that I want to put a bit of trust back into the scheme, into people. I think if you want to make modest changes to your plan, you get micromanaged and second guessed. You have to prepare reports that are read by people who either don't read them, or if they read them, you seriously wonder if they understand them. I want to create longer plans as a default position. I want to make sure that when people are seeking early intervention, that they don't have to keep writing report after report after report. I want the therapists to deliver the early intervention rather than have to write reports. We've also said we want to get more trained staff in the scheme. We can't do that overnight, but we have said that we're going to lift the staff cap at the National Disability Insurance Agency. That's a big obstacle to people, where they're talking to people who don't know who don't have the confidence of the participants. Another big problem with the plans we see is that you get 4 different people in the course of a year or 2 years. You never get the same person to deal with, and it's very tiring to have to keep to re-explain everything time and time again. Anyway, I don't want to obviously I've got lots I could say, but perhaps more questions will tease out more of the answers.
Yeah. So I think it actually leads perfectly into our first topic we wanted to discuss, which is staffing and the lack of training with staff. So many people in our community express concerns over the lack of training and understanding, and even the empathy of LACs and NDIA planners. So you've mentioned that you're going to raise the staffing cap, but how is the Labor government going to address these concerns around training and understanding?
Well, one problem that people have, that participants and families encounter, is the high turnover of people they deal with. And it's really tiring to have to re-explain your issue time and time again. So the government, I think, made a mistake several years ago. They froze the number of people who could work at the NDIA. And so what they've been doing is substituting in a lot of temporary labour people. That doesn't give people at the agency the chance to develop knowledge. Also, it means that good people eventually have to worry about job security rather than their day job, because that's important. So we're lifting the staff cap immediately, and if we get elected, we'll put another 380 staff in straight away. But it's now overdue for a conversation between the role of the planner, the role of the plan manager, the role of the support coordinator, and the role of the local area coordinator. There's a lot of overlap. So we want to focus on getting the best possible planners, the people who do the initial plan. Then what we want to do is assist people by having plan navigators. See, if you get a package, you don't always know, what's out there and how to use it. So they're the 2 core functions that we want to specialise in. With planners, we accept that whilst there's got to be a geographic spread of planners, some people present with pretty complex conditions. So we've got to set up some skill-based functional groups who are just good at dealing with complex conditions. I know it's very annoying when you're told that what the primary disability is, when you know that for your child or for your family member, there's a range of conditions. So we think by keeping permanent staff and giving them a career path, we think by prioritising the task. The other thing I intend to do is call in the TAFEs, the unis and the private RTOs within our first 100 days and say, what are you doing to train people? What do you need to train people better? We also think one of the things we could do is encourage carers and people with disability to become planners and to work in the actual system because they know the world best. So that's upholding our principle of co-design and involving people with disability.
Linda, did you want to say something?
Bill, as part of the Kindship group, my main role is obviously helping people advocate their plans and to go through their plans. One of the big things that I'm finding a bit of a struggle with is a lot of people's ability to write the plans for their children, whether it is they have a disability themselves and don't understand how to write goals. It's a very complex and I think a very hard system to navigate. It's easy once we get to know it, but that first plan and the second plan can be really hard for somebody. I just had a mother yesterday say to me, Linda, I feel really inadequate. I feel bad that my education level is not doing the right thing for my child. I don't know how to write their plan and I feel lost and I'm doing more harm than good. How will Labor change the ability of them learning how to access the plan? Because that's what I want to do with Kindship, is to hold their hand and show them how to write these in the first place. But there's only one of us group, so we need us to be able to be strong to help people.
Well, despite what the government says, I don't think the agency is really looking for new business. And I think a lot of these bureaucratic walls and leaving people just to deal with a computer portal is a deliberate strategy, although they'll never say it, to discourage people getting into the scheme. So we want to do more outreach if we get elected. And that's why this election's so important, because if I get the chance, I want to put more of the NDIS staff doing outreach, going out to groups such as your own, working in community houses, just explaining to people how it all works. Your point goes to what I'm saying too about the importance of getting that initial plan right. So we've got to really take the time to help explain to people what it does. I came across something appalling recently. We had some pretty good information from within the agency by conscientious people who are disgusted by what they're seeing. And what they said to me is that they've been told in the Section 100 reviews, they're the reviews you do internally if you don't plan or you've got a different decision, the agency staff have been told that as a starting place in the review teams, they're not to speak to the complainant. So I just don't know how, that's just shocking. And you've got to get a senior manager's position. It's a KPI, and that if you want to speak to a complainant seeking a review internally, you've got to get the permission of the manager, which is just obscene, frankly, and that goes to the point you're saying. We're also going to fund more advocacy. So I think you tend to a house is good or bad depending on its foundations. That's why getting the plan right is the key foundation of the experience in the NDIS. So we'd work with groups such as your own. We'll prioritise more staff to do the planning better. I've said we'll do better training, but also we'll do more outreach, and we'll certainly remove this instruction that people are not meant to speak to participants and their families.
And I think they don't want participants to speak to each other.
Well,
we can help each other.
But the other thing which would help you is if the agency started, like every matter's individual and unique, I get that, but there's some common issues, and there is a culture of secrecy in the agency and a lack of transparency. I don't just mean on revealing actuarial data or evidence, but on rulings to do with common matters. And I think that would actually help people know what they can ask for. And, it shouldn't be a game of hide and seek where you get skilled people who know what are the buzzwords which unlock the magic doors in the escape room. And other people, a bit like that, Bill. And other people who are not privy to those secret words just sort of banging their heads to get in. So I hope that answers it. And also I want to convey to you, I hope it shows you your thinking.
Yeah. Okay, another part of your plan is the Labor plan says it's going to put people with a disability back at the centre of the NDIS. and increase the number of people with disability on the NDIA and executive board. So Louise from our community has asked, how is your government going to ensure disabled people are front and centre of the NDIS on the board, and will this include senior management roles? And what is your plan for giving people with disability input on how the NDIS operates?
Well, it goes to the core of what we are saying. Thanks, Louise. First of all, we'll require that some of the people on the board and senior management are people with disability and lived experience. We've got to have that sort of affirmative approach in our hiring. So it just becomes a principle. One way which I'll instruct the agency to do, if they're not already doing it, is that when people make applications to even work in the agency, they don't put down their name or gender. So the initial interviews are not granted on anything other than people's work experience, rather than education, rather than ethnicity, gender, ability. So that'll be one way we can at least start knocking down unconscious bias. The agency at one stage had up to 15% of its staff were people who self-reported with a disability, but that number's fallen now. So we'll certainly make that a focus in terms of hiring. I've also got some other exciting ideas about leadership development more broadly within the disability world, so we can help skill people up. On the board itself, we'll have a requirement that there's some representation of people, not just who might even have a family member with a disability, although that's certainly relevant, but that we also have people with disability themselves there. Also, as a government, I'll go on.
I do like that fact there. I really do think that carers and parents who are actually taking care of their children are really missed and not thought of in our plans. And it actually hurts me to see a lot of people are at breaking point before they get any help, if any, still. I would like to see some more feedback being able to be given to you or given to the NDIA. And I don't think that that's there. I think we're almost ignored and sitting back in the background.
Well, I don't know if you know me very well, but that's the entire way I operate, is consultation. As the shadow minister, I feel like I've been doing the minister's job of all the consultations I do. So we'll be out and about. We'll set up formal consultation structures. The other instruction which we'll give in the planning process is that parents and carers are not to be viewed as having a conflict of interest with the participants. Like, you're not invisible. The only way that the NDIS can work is when a person with a disability in their whole ecosystem or, loving family are involved in it. So I don't accept that there's the interests of the participants are in one room and the interests of the family and carers are in another room. You're in the same room. That's just the way life is. So that instruction will go out in our first 100 days, the way the plans are done.
We might actually just skip forward, because now we're talking about informal supports. I think we could, let's just continue on that wavelength. So this topic is around informal supports not being appropriately supported. So I want to share my personal journey. In 2020, I actually received a depression diagnosis and my own mental health care plan, which involved 12 months of psychological support and medication. And that come right after my daughter's NDIS review. And I just feel like the mounting pressure on individuals with disabilities and their families is horrendous. And it's actually costing the government more money in dealing with these physical and mental health issues. So just some statistics. So according to a 2020 study by Deloitte Economics, commissioned by Carers Australia, so informal support saved the government $1.5 billion per week in unpaid support. So one of our community members, Chantel, asks, what's your plan for supporting carers and avoiding carer burnout, which puts more pressure essentially on the system as a whole?
I've got a colleague who's not on this phone hookup, so in part we'll ask Emma McBride, the member for Dobell. She's been doing specific work on carers, but in terms of carer policy, the government rolled out Carer Gateway in April of 2020, and to be fair to the government, that was right in the middle of COVID, but not enough carers are aware of what's available to them. So we'd prioritise in our carer budget getting information out to carers and to carer groups just about supports they can receive. The second point I would make is one which I've made just previously, but I think it's worth reinforcing. I don't view carers as being different to the person with a disability in terms of how we arrange support. So one of the things which we certainly look at in plans, and it's an example, is respite for carers is not a dirty word. Well, it's actually not a dirty sentence. It's if the carer falls over, if the parent falls over, then that's a disaster. And I've seen too many personal stories of maybe teenage kids. There's one story I recall out of Melbourne in the northern suburbs, a young woman, 16, very challenging behaviours. The parents couldn't get a couple of hours respite each week. They had it and then it got cancelled and it led to a divorce. The child was relinquished. Apart from the damage it did to that young woman and that destruction of that family, not having a bit of respite, in my opinion, she was eventually accommodated 20 kilometres away from the special school she was going to, and it caused over $1 million of damage to the hotel where she was staying. So, there's no economy in ignoring the carers and the stresses you go through. So we want to provide more information to carers, and we don't want them invisible or ignored in the NDIS participant plan.
Can I when you mentioned Carers Gateway, it just brought up a question for me, because I had called them personally myself, and they described, so how it's set up is that you get a package and you can spend that either on psychological services or short-term respite or domestic assistance. However, it's a whatever $1,000 package, and then once that's finished, they described to me, well, then you should have built your capacity and then be able to cope. And I said to them, so is my daughter not going to have a disability anymore, and those pressures not going to remain? So would you change that? Yeah, would you change?
Yeah, we would. You can't just, this is not like a voucher where once you've used up the voucher, that's the end of it. But that also means making sure that we've got proper Medicare support for people so that they can access mental health plans. But the jury's out for me on Carer Gateway. I think there's some okay things there, but I don't think the government, and maybe, perhaps on this one I'll be a little more charitable to the government. Their attention's been distracted by COVID, but the idea that there's a one-off finite amount for the carer support and then everything will be fine and dandy after that is just a fairy tale. But that's why I also go to the NDIS participant plan. That's an ongoing proposition. We've got to see how we can support how the participant benefits from the carer getting some support through that plan. So I see two avenues.
Yeah, great. And I know that Susan has had this conversation with us many times around the misuse of the term of normal parental responsibility. We've described many situations to Susan. So is there anything in your plan that will kind of stop the misuse of the legislation with families in terms of normal parental responsibility?
Well, in terms of the administrative policy that we issue, if I get to be a minister, we're going to have to redo how they do those planning things. And there's a couple of things which I think are triggering people. One is the overuse of the term value for money. The other one is parental responsibility. No parent, for example, of a child with non-verbal, autism, needs to be told about parental responsibility. No person with a disability who's been in a wheelchair, who's an adult with cerebral palsy, who's had a wheelchair their whole life, needs to be told about value for money. So I think what we're seeing is an approach within the agency from the top. It's not necessarily the person who says it, but they're following orders, so to speak. Just this dismissing people, their reasonable requests as not my problem, parental responsibility or value for money. No, we want to put some humanity back into that process. So the administrative instructions would change from us.
So do you think that will Labor seek to put carers and their parents in the plan as well, instead of separating Carers Gateway with our plans? Will we all be seen as
not
one
every
rather
carer.
than so separate?
I would like to still have two things, but I'd like them talking to each other. I think that not every carer who uses Carer Gateway has a family member on the NDIS. So they're not the only carers. And not everyone on the NDIS, the support they require as a carer matter.
Needs it.
But having said that, I do not get the impression that there's adequate communication. And it's almost like if you have an NDIS plan, the carer gets ignored. Or if you've dealt with Carer Gateway once, as you previously said, then that's people wash their hands of the matter. Being a carer and living with a lifelong disability, these are lifelong matters. So we wouldn't combine the two, but we'd certainly have a lot better communication between the two. And also within NDIS plans, we've got to reevaluate how we treat the carer. They can't be invisible in the plan because it's just not real.
Okay, great. Susan, did you want to add to that? I saw you unmute.
No, I think it was me unmuting. Look, and I just wanted to say, when I talk to you guys and so many other parents about this, the point of needing support yourself is because you've been through a tortuous process with the NDIA. And I would be hoping we don't break people's spirit by going through plans and reviews, and that they're not forced to fight big legal battles, which is what a lot of the pressure when people come to me, that's the pressure they're experiencing. So that then the support for carers is there to actually support, not to try and stop a crisis, because we haven't got you to a point of crisis. For me, that is the end goal. And I have seen, as Bill will have, so many capable, extraordinary, often women just brought to breaking point. And that's wrong. That is not the vision that Bill had when, Bill, when you established the NDIS, that was not the vision. But we have to get back to being humane.
I agree. I have one thing to add with LACS that we were talking about before. I actually have not ever heard from my LAC except for when I'm doing the review process or the actual initial plan. The whole 12 months, my daughter has cerebral palsy, not even to the point where they say, how are you going? I feel that groups such as Kindship and other women or families, actually I can lean on for support more, even just to check in and to see how they are. We do a daily check-in with Kindship, and it gives me more stability. And we were talking about the red lipstick effect before. It allows me to feel like I can go on about with my day, pop it on and feel. So I normally jump on, get a little bit of a breather, feel, okay, we can do this, and then go ahead. I just feel very saddened that my LACs have had less knowledge on my child's disability and care factor of checking in just to say, how are you going through COVID? How are you? Do you need anything? There was nothing, actually.
If I might give you just a bit of a comment. I know that between 2008 and 2010, when I was sort of starting the discussion about an NDIS, I was very influenced by what I saw in the Victorian bushfires, where 173 people were killed and thousands had their house burnt down. It was terrible, very traumatic. And if you've ever had a terrible flood or a terrible bushfire, and it takes away all your family, not just the house, but the birth certificates, the wedding photos, the memories, it can be very demoralising how to start again. Susan knows this from personal experience. So what I thought about, what we did there is we created case managers, not to tell people no, but rather to help people navigate the system. See, I always saw it that we'd get a really good first plan for people, and then they'd have a case manager or someone they could deal with to navigate the system. But somehow that process has become very commoditized, more like a drive-through at McDonald's. And, there's some very good LACs, but the good ones seem to go, and then you've got to re-explain it all again. So I just want to get back to first principles. The experience on the NDIS isn't to cure you. It's, and I've seen some really ignorant comments from current government ministers that people aren't getting better. It was to give you quality of life, give you control over your life. It was saying we've got scarce resources, but the person receiving the services and their immediate support network are better at allocating those resources than government or anyone else. And it's just become commoditized down to a very bare bones, you've got too much. See, one thing I promise to change if we get in our first 100 days is we've created a prisoner or a ghetto mentality that if you don't spend all your money, you won't get the same amount the next year. I want to stop that. If you've got a package of 50K for 1 year and you only spend 40, well, then you'll still have 50K the next year.
I have people that I'm fighting for that didn't spend all of their plan due to COVID, and then we're told now that we're able to access therapies, oh, too bad, you didn't spend your money, so you're not getting it this year. I
see. That's a horrible, horrible thing. It's so stupid as well. It's so unrealistic.
It's true.
And can I add in, it's a problem in areas like ours where you can't always access the services you need in the time required under the plan.
And also, the whole aim of the scheme was to give you control so that perhaps you got more, you haven't needed to use every cent. I want to send you a message but that's comforting knowing that depending on what happens, you might not. But you should be rewarded if you don't necessarily use every cent. And the reward shouldn't be you lose it.
Yeah, there's definitely that belief. And then people go and spend to make sure that they're using their plan.
Just before.
Yeah. So let's move on to the review process. So honestly, the review process is one of the most common concerns for parents and carers in our kindship community, like the complexity of the process, the time it takes to prepare and gather all the data, all the evidence, and the stress that it places on the family unit. So I just wanted to share a couple of examples just to give you some context. So last week we heard a story from a mum. She's asked to remain anonymous. She has MS and she has her own NDIS plan and also has 2 children with disabilities on the NDIS. She just described to us how the stress of preparing for their last review caused her an MS flare, and she was hooked up to a drip in hospital, continuing to write her carer impact statement because she had to prepare for the review. I know Linda had COVID and had to prepare for her review with Lucy just a couple of weeks ago. And then we have many instances of unfair and inconsistent funding. So Shami, her son actually goes to my daughter's school. So she shared her frustration by saying, how can 2 children of the same age in the same class at a specialised school with similar circumstances get such a big difference in funding? It just doesn't make sense. So your government has said you're going to fix the planning pathway and appeals to make NDIS decisions more efficient and fair. But how is that going to happen?
Well, by putting more staff into the system, we'll actually get the people reviewing your appeal to talk to you. That just radically. And the other thing is, there's got to be some criteria around the ability of participants to make decisions. In other words, we'll start with things like home modifications, shower mods, assistive technology. If a decision is not made within a certain date, then it's deemed accepted. We've got to stop getting people chasing their own tail to just keep re-justifying basic stuff. If you've got cerebral palsy, for example, or if you are blind, you shouldn't have to keep re-justifying why you need a replacement chair or white cane. And literally, these are all stories I've heard. So we think putting more staff in, putting some reciprocal obligations on the agency. The other thing which we want to do is start publishing certain general policy decisions that just assists everyone to know what's, within the swim lanes and what isn't. At the moment, everything's...
I would love to see, because obviously my daughter's got cerebral palsy, which is a little bit different to Sandy's situation. But when I have 2 parents that have got 2 level 3 CP kids that both need therapy, one gets $30,000 worth of therapies, the other one gets $10,000. They both have the same requirements. One, unfortunately, is in a lower socio area that doesn't know how to write up her plans, and the other one isn't. I feel honestly that the plans and the money that they've received is because of how they've written them rather than what the child needs. And I don't think that is fair. I would like to see a change in that, whether it is, whether the LAC needs more training into that area to know that what's available and what they need for that disability. My daughter needs weekly physio, and I get told, well, maybe she'll only need it once a fortnight. But the specialist says 3 times a week because she's got ataxia, and then I have to explain to them the difference between ataxia and spasticity. And if I don't keep her muscles strong, she falls over more. They don't have the understanding. I got told maybe it will go away soon. I just think that there needs to be core things in place to educate them instead of me having to fight. I feel that it's a fight. I go in with war paint and my red lipstick.
Well, Linda, and you have done that for dozens of families, so I can understand why you feel that way. And I know Susan's well aware of like how you've advocated there. Did you want to respond to that?
Well, you answer your own point, really. The current system's just broken. And I've got to say, hoping that it's going to change by re-electing the same government is magical thinking. Like, it's just, it's the triumph of hope over experience. In terms of how we do it, publish rulings on common matters. The other thing I'm interested in asking the agency to do is I'd like to see family plans. If you've got 2 children with an impairment in the same family, whilst they're unique kids, some of the common issues in their plans. So why not, do it as a group rather than having separate matters all the time? I think the third thing is, as I said, publishing rulings on certain matters so that people can see if they're within the range of what seems fair, or if it seems inconsistent. The agency's got to be willing to back up its decisions, and it avoids it by not publishing decisions.
Sure.
And that makes it hard to
I just
wrestle
think it
with.
make it easier.
Like a transparency,
Yeah, and I'm not saying that every child, every person is the same. They're not, but there's some common issues. The other thing is, as a parent, I don't want you to have to come to me as the government saying I want to vary something by a few $100s. Do you know what? I trust you. You're the one raising your kids, not me. And within a certain range, you should have some discretion. You're not a child yourself. You don't need to be second guessed.
I said to my LAC, do you think I enjoy running from therapy to therapy as well as holding a full-time job as a single mother? I do it because my daughter needs it. Now, if she needs it, and the specialist is recommending it, why are you saying no? Or you cannot fund it?
What answer did you get?
She just told me that how can I possibly, now that she was at school, be able to work full-time and take her to therapy? That's all she said. She said, I don't understand how you can do that. Not that she needs it, just that I don't understand how you can do it.
That kind of brings us to our next question, which was another concern from our community, is that much of the evidence and reports collected by parents and carers and people with disabilities is disregarded or not even read. So Carrie Lynn has asked, she said, when we see a doctor and they write a referral and report for a specialist, we expect the specialist to read it in full. This allows them to make decisions based on evidence and information in the report. And she asks, how will your government ensure that LACs and planners who decide the amount of funding an individual person receives reads all the documentation provided prior to making decisions?
Well, they should be reading it now, but we'll have better qualified LACs and planners. The other thing is, I'd want to drill down into what's being asked of people for variations in plans. Like, below a certain figure, I actually don't think you should have to come to us. Like, the whole aim was to give you or people on this Zoom autonomy and agency. So I don't think you should be coming to us on every little thing. I think you should just have some power in your own lives, because that's what's so exhausting, being second guessed by people who are not doing the night shifts and everything else. Also, I think the more we can be transparent in decision making, the easier it is for people to know the rules. At the moment, no one knows the rules, and it's become an art form where if you can find the right sort of NDIS plan whisperer, you're through, and everyone else can't.
So in terms of accountability, though, what systems would you put in place to make sure that the planners are actually doing their role. I submitted 120 pages of evidence last year and it did not get read.
Right.
They told me they didn't read it.
Well, that's just madness. We're going to have a complaints process, a checking system, because that's really drilling down.
I rang up to complain.
Yeah,
I rang up to complain and I got told, Linda, they're not going to even listen to you. You seem like a really nice lady, but I can tell you right now, I'm only on the call desk. So I can tell you she's not going to answer you. She's not going to come back to you. I'm like, but where do I go from here if she's not going to answer me?
I've got to say, it comes back down to the instructions coming from the top. There's no accountability in the agency at the top. I hear all of these complaints. The only way you're going to do it is by changing the management. Like, I'm not in charge of the scheme now. If I was in charge of the scheme, I'd say, give me your individual example and we'll drill into it. But I'm not there.
Susan normally does that for me.
Yeah, and she's great. And all of the MPs, even Liberal MPs, is so ironic. One of the 2 or 3 biggest issues in their offices is fixing up NDIS matters. But really, I can't sort out every faulty bit under the hood until we get into the driver's seat.
And do you know what? I actually just feel like fixing one person's plan is not a good use of resources. It needs to be systemic from the top. There's so many problems that it's like every day we're talking about it.
In my opinion, the morale in the agency is shot. The fact that you can talk to people in the system and they say there's no point just shows that a lot of the initiatives been beaten out of people and there's a lot of resignation that things can't get better, which is why it's a complete disaster if the current crew get back in.
I agree with what
you want to add? I think Susan just unmuted. Linda would have let.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when MPs' offices are the default complaint place, that the system is not working the way it should be, and we'll always be here to raise things. We'd love to be making systemic changes and have an agency that is able to function and for people to feel like they're getting good service there. It is it would probably be the top issue that we deal with. And that's partly because Kim in my office working with me, we just won't let things go and keep looking for other ways to do it. But it is a system. It is absolutely the need for a whole system change. And I did notice someone say, keep a recording of this so that you can hold us to account if we get in and there's any sort of backflip. But I can tell you, I know Bill's conviction for it. I can hear him even through the COVID just going, we just have to fix it. There is no choice here. We are so determined to, if we get in, make this a priority. And because you guys shouldn't be fighting on your own for this. You've been doing it for too long and you don't know anything different. And I understand why there's some, cynicism about, can they really make a difference? Yes, we can. It can be different and will be.
The whole reason why Sandy brought me across to Kindship was to do some templates up with with Sandy, and have it more accessible and easy, because there is only one of us, as we say. I think the NDIA needs to be, and the NDIS needs to be the same. It needs to understand we can't just help one, it has to be broader, because there's so many that we have to help. And I do believe, I have friends who say to me, oh, but Linda, we can't afford it as a community to keep on paying this. And I said, but you're paying it in other sectors if you don't fix it here at the grassroots. You're paying it in healthcare, you're paying it in education. We need more clear cut, and I just need to understand why.
The solutions.
Why and how do we vote for?
The solutions have all been outlined. I'm not. Common sense is a large dose of common sense and some accountability will go a long way. I'm not saying it all gets fixed on the day after the election, but nothing. You complain to this government and nothing changes. In fact, it gets worse. This government also has a mindset, in my opinion, of saying it's not sustainable. I don't regard $24 billion invested as a cost. I regard it as an investment, which generates a lot more jobs, a lot more activity. I do think money's being wasted, but it's your time that gets wasted. It's the lawyers that are getting paid. It's the use of consultants it's some people in the service delivery service sector of disability charging one amount if you don't have a package and then doubling it if you do. there are things going on which are not right, and money, and some people roll their eyes at that. But all of you are being let down by a government who's happy to fan that sort of criticism from the cheap seats that it's all just too expensive, when in fact it's incompetent management. Well, I really believe this.
One of our questions coming up was actually around the price guide and price gouging, and there's been a few, it's actually popped up a few times. I believe Genevieve in the comments has asked around it too. So what your plan states that labels stop waste and reduce service provider fraud. So what is the plan for that, for actually stopping that wastage and reducing the service provider fraud?
Oh, well, we've got to strengthen the Quality and Safeguard Commission. I want to strengthen the agency's internal fraud investigation units. I think we've got to call in all the service providers and say why this habit of having two prices has got to end. It's not fair that NDIS packages are cross-subsidising other business models. I'm not saying everyone who's doing it's doing it for a bad reason, but you can't of the whole world. So they're all measures that we would do. We'll also fund advocacy better, we need to hear the stories as well and then act on them. So we'll resource fraud investigation, the Safety Commission. We'll talk to service providers. The other thing is that if you're providing a disability service, I don't see how you can have workers who aren't at least registered.
Yeah. I actually worked for a disability service last year as a teacher, and I can understand why they need to charge what they charge in regards to the price guide, because of the audits and the red tape that comes along with that. So
that's a good point.
Like Linda and I were actually talking yesterday about we understand there's two prices. However, they shouldn't be that vast. That shouldn't be that much red tape that there's that much difference between pricing.
No, but that's a good point. The red tape's real. And if I've met with a range of bodies representing businesses and service providers, I've got no doubt we can cut some of that red tape, because first of all, we're asking people to record things which have no relationship to the proper and safe and quality delivery of services. The second thing is we're asking people to deal with government to register in a way where they've already registered with other government agencies, so there's duplication there. So I get there's got to be a way we can decrease that red tape experience.
Yeah, and because I worked very closely with the owner of that company, and she works her butt off, and she's like all about the participants, but the red tape actually is like the biggest stress on her actually running her. It's killing her business. And it's not. I don't think that's fair either. Okay, so we had some questions around waiting lists and early intervention. So Tracy has a daughter with Down syndrome, and she said, how can we ensure that the vast differences in plan amounts don't happen when children turn 7 and move off ECEI and onto the NDIS? Do their therapy or support needs lessen when they turn 7? Where is the consistency in providing continuing supports to children to allow them to live their best life?
Well, part of the problem, thank you for the question or the observation. Part of the problem is that because the federal government's been delinquent on the NDIS, and there hasn't been enough pressure on the states to lift their support for kids in schools. The fact of the matter is, if you've had an early childhood intervention and then all of a sudden you're in the school system and you're losing some of your hours outside of school, but they're not being replaced by hours of support within the school system, you become pretty frantic about losing any support. But the NDIS was never intended to replace the school system. So in the medium term, we've got to make the states stand up more on early childhood intervention, and for kids in schools. That's a pretty important part of the big picture. But I'm worried that in the tenders which are going out currently under this government, if they're re-elected, they're going to keep hacking away at ECI funding. We just want peer-reviewed, evidence-based research which proves the value of therapies. There's no doubt in my mind this government's conducting a bit of a mini crusade against kids with autism and the funding they're getting. So we want to stop that.
Can I have
proposed a national autism strategy too. That'll take a while, but we want to keep. We've got to keep the pressure on early childhood funding, not just for kids of autism, but for all kids.
Sorry, Linda.
I'm really big on neuroplasticity and brain plasticity. Through myself, when my daughter was diagnosed, I actually received her diagnosis at 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon from her neurologist, and it just said, need mother's permission for MRI, suspected cerebral palsy. I tried ringing and nobody answered the phone, so I was left with Google and myself to find out what I could do for my daughter. Obviously upset for the first 24 hours, thinking she won't be able to do anything, but then I started researching and read a lot of books and reports and white papers on brain plasticity. So yes, we need early intervention is huge, but the access for early intervention can sometimes be 6 months plus. I would love for other departments to be able to cross over and talk to each other, being the NDIS, to giving support such as, I would love free swimming lessons for all children under the age of 5. Water actually increases neuron activity by 14% to the brain. So if not only are we helping children by being able to have swimming access, but we're also helping neuroplasticity. And this crosses over to all different abilities, not only physical, but autism.
Our next question was around like waiting lists and how we're going to make it more accessible. Like I had to wait 7 months for a behaviour support therapist, and then I had to get someone from Newcastle to start with phone consults, and I'm in Sydney. So like, how do we address that?
Well, I can't say that I can address that on day one. And if anyone says they can, be very suspicious of them. I have said, and I don't know if I've mentioned it in this presentation, but I've said it in plenty of places, I want to bring in the TAFEs and the unis in straight away in the first 100 days. So what are we doing to get a pipeline of extra people? Because there's a shortage.
Especially if it's part of physiotherapists training at university to be able to be allied health workers and have to give so many hours in their training plans and packages would help a lot.
Wouldn't it be good if I was the minister and then next week you could come to a meeting with me in the unis? But the point is...
I would. I'd do it.
I know, but the point is, I tell you what will happen to waiting lists to re-elect the current government. They'll be longer in 3 years' time. I'm saying to you and to everyone listening, to everyone you talk to, I'm an interested, committed politician, one of the few who can chant. It's only Labor or Liberal can... There's many who are interested, but there's only Labor or Liberal can form a government. And so I don't know how to convey how urgent and important it is that if we want to tackle the waiting lists, I'm telling you, I'll call the universities and the TAFEs in and the RTOs, and I'm telling you with all of my experience, profile and commitment that we'll crack on with it. The current mob just can't make that same promise, because if they could, they'd have solved this shortage when they got in 9 years ago.
Awesome. I'm mindful of time, so I just want to make sure we have another topic we want to discuss, and it was the collaboration between sectors. And I know you just mentioned like education and NDIA not talking to one another. So Christy has submitted a question, and she said that NDIA will currently cut funding and tell us that parents and schools need to do more, and that the responsibility is on us. If elected, what will you do to ensure adequate support and training is provided to parents and teachers, the education system?
There's a thing called the Disability Reform Ministers' Council.
Have you guys just lost sound for Bill?
Just come back.
Pardon?
Oh, hold on, you're back.
No, sorry.
Now it's come back.
I'm getting a lot of other incoming calls, so I'm just getting talk. So we get the Disability Reform Council together, and listen, the states need the NDIS to help them with bed block and hospitals. The first issue I'm going to put on the agenda with the states is, what are you doing about the school system? Because that's a big part of the missing link. The second thing I'd put on the agenda with the states will be community mental health. And this goes to the big picture. And I know people on this are probably concerned about their individual circumstances as well as the big picture. But the NDIS is like a lifeboat in an ocean, and it's the only lifeboat, so everyone swims to it. Whereas it was never intended to be the only lifeboat. And what I would do if I was the Minister for National Disability Insurance Scheme is start leading a debate of pushing the other parts of the system, federal departments and state departments, to focus on services for people with disability. We call that the National Disability Strategy, but too many governments wash their hands of disability and say that's an NDIS matter, when in fact it's not. It's a whole of life, whole of government, whole of society matter.
Mm-hmm.
Or vice versa. They say it is an education matter or a healthcare matter.
Yeah.
I feel like they don't talk
can't
to
get
one
covered
another.
Yeah.
So we had another question around collaboration between sectors. Oh, we've just lost Susan by the looks of it. And it was, how will Labor, this is from Juliana, how will Labor ensure the sustainability of the NDIS and participant choice and control with Fair Work now making minimum support worker engagement 2 hours for all carers? So the example she gave is, say a person with a disability needs an hour in the morning to go to the toilet and have a shower, and the same in the afternoon. They're now being forced to have 2 2-hour shifts, which then means 4 hours of their funding rather than 2. So will Fair Work and NDIS start talking to each other around these issues?
NDIS and Fair Work have to talk to each other, but we need a system where you can't just, it's not the fault of the person with a disability, but the worker's got to get paid too. The idea that there's a whole
but what they
hear us out first.
What they mean by that, though, yeah, cool.
I actually do know what they mean. But no, you tell me. Sorry.
Oh no, all I meant was that generally the care is being, or the support worker is being provided by an agency. That agency will send somebody to 3 homes in an area. So it's not that they're missing out on paid work. They're still getting an 8-hour shift. I'm not talking about an hour here. And
yeah, good. Well, none of this is too hard to work out. Okay, I want people paid properly, but I don't want participants not getting, seeing their packages artificially burned up, expended quicker than they want to be. But I don't think there's any meaningful dialogue between the agency, Fair Work Commission, the Disability Services, and in fact, I know there's no meaningful dialogue. This problem is not too hard to sort out. It's just not enough talking to each other. One of the skills I bring to this, if I get the job, is I used to be the IR minister. I understand how you've got to have something for everyone. This is not too hard. The money's there to do the job. It's not too hard, but the agency and all the other stakeholders are not in the same room sorting it out, including and carers.
Yeah, thank you. So I know we talked about the co-design process before. So we're about to launch our advocacy program, as Linda mentioned, and I know there's going to be lots of people from the Kindship community that would love to be involved in any NDIS co-design process. So how can our community members get involved in that process if you are elected?
We'll come back to you and talk to you about that. I guarantee you'll be involved, but I have to be blunt. It's all just pipe dreams unless we get elected.
Yep.
So as much as you guys are focused on after the election, I need you to talk to people about the election. We lost the 2019 election because too many people who wanted change banked a win. If what I've said today, if not everything, no one has to agree with everything I've said. No one probably would. It'd be nice if you did, but I don't expect that. But this is a competition between Liberal and Labor. You can talk about the small parties all you like. The reality is only 2 of us are going to be able to form a government to do something on the NDIS. You've got to realise the current government will not, are they going to talk to you after the election? They'll promise it, but they've had so long to do it already. But I promise you we'll talk after the election. It's just the way I'm built. We will do that. You know what's going on. I don't have to know what's going on. I just have to be good at listening to you.
This is why we precisely are getting inviting both of you parties to talk to us to see who our members want to vote for and why. Why should they vote for Labor? What are you going to do for us as carers and parents?
Yes, and to provide them the information that's important to them, because I feel like sometimes people aren't making an educated choice. It's based on what they've heard in snippets on mainstream media rather than actually hearing. Yeah. So, Bill, sorry, you go.
I'm frustrated people are with the status quo. I really do. So I appreciate you informing and you give me a lot of food for thought in this discussion.
Awesome, thank you. So,
and I thank you guys too, because I know our time will be running up. And Bill, you've done amazing that you are still with us an hour on, because when I had COVID, I don't think I could have sustained it for an hour. And I recognise lots of people listening won't necessarily be just in my electorate, but I want to thank the two of you, Sandy and Linda, and the people you have around you for the advocacy you've done that I have seen firsthand over the last 6 years. I don't think you should have had to have worked that hard, but I'm so grateful that you have. And you're part of the reason why I want to make things better, because I don't want to see wonderful women like you burning out because we have made a system, this government has created a system that's so hard for you to use. And I trust that Bill is going to work his butt off to improve it, and I'll be there if I'm re-elected, pushing him every step of the way.
Awesome. Well,
and Bill will be grateful for that.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
We do. We're very grateful for your time today, and know that our community will have found your responses really informing and hopefully useful in making their decision. So thank you everyone who's joined us today, or who's watching the recording. We know there was lots of people who couldn't tune in live. And we know this election issue is really important for the well-being of your families. So, and a special thank you to the people in our community who submitted questions. I know there was lots we couldn't get to. We tried to put them all together as best we could. So thank you, Bill and Susan, again. And if you're not part of our Kindship community yet, please download the free app. We'd love to welcome you and help to really support you and, help you navigate this journey, because it doesn't have to be isolating. We have a whole community of wonderful parents who want to stand behind you and beside you. So thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.